Greetings and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Sliders Review. And I'm here today to talk to you about The Howling, the 1981 movie. This movie was directed and edited by that of Joe Dante. It was written by John Salis and Terrence H. Rinkless. And it is based on a novel of the same name by that of Gary Branier. And so this is actually my first time ever watching this movie. I can now finally say I've watched every movie Randy mentioned in the first Scream movie. I've been wanting to watch a lot of these like classic horror movies from like the 70s and the 80s and stuff. And I'm working my way down the list and stuff, but I can finally scratch off all the ones from that Randy mentioned and Scream. Another reason why I watched this movie, because originally I wasn't gonna watch this. I'm not the biggest werewolf fan, to tell you the truth. I don't know what it is, I've just never been a fan of werewolf movies. I think it's because it's hard to make a werewolf look convincing on screen, because for the most part, you really should go the practical route. Like, I've seen a CGI werewolf before in like that one Harry Potter movie, and I just don't like CGI looking like werewolves and stuff. They're weird looking, I like the practical stuff. Like, I do like the werewolves in the Underworld series, but those Underworld movies started to get bad after like the third movie. But their werewolves looked pretty cool on screen. But with their werewolves, like the face were more cat-like than dog. Even the creators said they went the more cat route than a dog look, because if you try to make a werewolf look like an actual wolf, they just come out looking like a dog and everything. And that's the honest to God truth. But then in the second movie, they actually had a really convincing werewolf. Like, William looked great in the second movie as a werewolf. He had the dog-like face. It was decades of filmmakers finally making a convincing looking werewolf that didn't look like somebody's wearing a mask, even though he was and everything, And so, I think that's the reason why I don't like werewolf movies, is because of the simple fact their faces either look like a dog, look really weird, or they have a really weird, rubbery, leathery looking face, and also their bodies don't move that much because it's a full-on bodysuit. So their movement is very limited. So I've never really been a fan of werewolf stuff. I mean, I saw the werewolves in the Buffy series, and those look really fuzzy and weird. Oh, that's another thing. Sometimes they look very fuzzy and everything, like a Tribble, but with arms and stuff. And so I just never really been a fan of werewolves. And every time I do see a werewolf on screen, sometimes if they don't have the budget for it, you barely see the werewolf on screen, like in The Haunting Hour, because they didn't have a big budget for that television kid series and stuff. And I remember the first werewolf movies I've ever seen was Teen Wolf, and this other classic comedy movie called, I think, My Mom's a Werewolf or something like that. It was like a comedy where the mom's a werewolf and then she accidentally turns her daughter into a werewolf. I remember the scene where they had to shave their legs and the hair keeps growing back. That movie and stuff. I think it's like an 80s movie or something. It was trying to be like Teen Wolf, but I think it ended up bombing at the box office. But I do remember that movie. But the main reason why I wanted to watch this was because of that of Dee Wallace and everything. The first time I've ever seen her was an Amazon Kids show that I reviewed called Just Add Magic. I love Just Add Magic. God, I missed that show. Anyways, that's the first thing I ever saw her in. Or at least that's what I thought. But I've actually seen her in other stuff. I saw her in E.T. I saw her in Rising Sun. But I've never saw her in nothing horror related. And I heard she was like a legend in horror movies. I'm all like, if she's a legend in horror movies, how come I've never heard of any of her movies? So I decided to look up her profile. I'm like, oh, she was in the Howling and everything. I'm like, I don't want to watch no werewolf movie. But I found the slasher she was in, where she was technically a final girl, but she wasn't the main star. She's kind of like a co-star. I have to get the name of that slasher movie. It came out in the very early 2000s, maybe 2001. It is a horrible slasher movie that is very confusing. And I do not like that movie. I watch that movie's not even worth like talking about. It's that confusing, but it's on Tubi. Um, Geez, what was the? I can't remember the name of it. I'm trying to block that movie out in my head. So let me see if I can find that real fast on her Wikipedia page. Let's see. It came out in the 2000s. Yeah, I can't even find it on her Wikipedia page. Um, no, it's not Dead End Road. What is it? If it came out in the early 2000s, I can't even find it on her. Oh, Killer Instinct. Um, no, not Killer Instinct. I think it is Killer Instinct. I think. Um, yeah, I think it is Killer Instinct. It's not a good movie. It doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Like, and it's just so confusing. But if you want to watch that, go watch that on Tubi because it's on Tubi. But yeah, someone like I want to watch something horror related with her in it. She's like this famous like scream like queen and everything. So I'm like, all right, fine. I'll watch The Howling. And wow, there's so many Howling movies. Like I can't even like begin to tell you. Like there's at least 8 or 9 of them, and one of them's a reboot, and the reboot did not do very well. And so it's funny because like this Howling movie is an American movie, but when you go down the list, because it's an American horror movie, but when you go down the list, it starts to change. It starts to become like a British movie or a British comedy, or like, and it's like, when did this American movie become like a British or international franchise? And so this one was based on, like I said, a novel, but the second movie was not. And the second movie is not even really a direct sequel to this movie, but it has like the main character's brother now in the second movie. But then as you go down the list of like Howling movies, then some of them start to go back to like the novels and everything. Some do better than most from what I heard. I am kind of curious a little bit now to see what the other ones are like. But like I said before, not the biggest werewolf fan. I am a huge vampire fan. But werewolves, I just don't know. Like, those costumes gotta be convincing for me. Now, this movie, man, the special effects are amazing in this, and they're practical because this was the 80s and stuff. And they're so realistic, it looks better than a CGI transformation in the modern day. Granted, the transformation did go on for way too long, but that's okay because I get why they did that. When you work hard to do something like that and you spend several hours working on something like a transformation and you're trying to figure it out, especially practically and everything, and it's like a hard, tedious task, you want every second of that transformation on screen, whether how long it takes or not, you know? So I totally get why they did what they did. And so, but yeah, the transformation sequence is just like, I look at that and I'm just like, how did they do that? And how did they do that back in the 80s of all things, you know? Like, you gotta give the props up to the people who created that because that's not easy because they didn't have CGI back then. Now, before I go any further, may I say rest in peace to a lot of these stars that have passed away. And whew, there are a lot that have passed away. Now, when it comes to this movie, there's only really like 2 people I've ever heard of. of course, is Dee Wallace and everything. I knew she was in this, but like, and she's alive, by the way. But Patrick McNee, I remember him from Nightman. And so those are, and then I didn't know Robert Picardo's in this movie. He's still alive, but a lot of these other people who died, like Patrick McNee, may he rest in peace. Elizabeth Brooks, my God, what a gorgeous woman. Like, I've never seen her on screen, like, never and stuff. And she sadly passed away. And, props to her for being bisexual, especially during, like, in the 80s and the 90s when people would vilify you for that and stuff. But there's a lot of people who passed away in this movie, so may they rest in peace. But yeah, I never knew like Dee Wallace was in this movie, Patrick McNee, Robert Picardo, the doctor from Star Trek himself. Like, I never knew that, man. Like, that's so cool and stuff. And so I will say with this 90-minute movie, it does take a very long time for the movie to start getting like really good with like the werewolf stuff. Now, some people like this movie, some people don't. It initially didn't really do too well when it first came out, but people love the special effects. But it is a classic nevertheless. But it does take a good long while just to figure out what exactly this movie about. Now, one thing I think is very clever and really unique about this movie is like, if I were to go into this movie not knowing it's about werewolves, and if it had a different title to it, I would have never guessed what this movie is about. And I kind of wish this movie had a different title and everything, because when you watch this movie and you watch, like, say, like the first hour-ish of the movie, you don't really know what it's about. You assume it's just about a woman who's an investigative, like, reporter, and she gets like amnesia, goes on a retreat, and spending time with like, her boyfriend, and then he cheats on her with one of the locals. You just assume it's one of those type movies, but then all of a sudden, werewolves start to pop up, and it's just kind of like in the most casual way, and it's like, wait, what? That would have been the biggest like shocker of them all, and a huge twist that the colony that they're at, this retreat type place, the locals are werewolves and everything. And then, that would have been like the biggest shocker ever. So I wish this movie had like a different title to it. But yeah, it's about like Dee Wallace character who is called Karen White. And so she's investigating this, like, I guess like a serial killer or something. And she's working with the police to like, apprehend him. Things kind of go wrong. He takes her to this sleazy like porno place and makes her watch a porno of a woman getting like attacked by like these men. After a while, the police realize, hey, this is going badly and they need to stop him. And so they just straight up like just shoot up the place and he dies and everything. But apparently, something happened. The traumatic event gave her like some type of amnesia or something like that. And so she goes to kind of like this retreat with her boyfriend. And yeah, the beginning part of this movie with the investigative thing and her doing that and almost getting attacked by that dude, that's really good and interesting. You think it's gonna be like a crime drama type thing or like a stalkery type movie. Once you get to the retreat, it gets kind of weird and it kind of like slows down the movie. I guess it's to give the illusion that these people are just about as normal as like normal can be until you find out they're werewolves and stuff. And so there's like this one character played by like, what did I say her name was, like Elizabeth and stuff. What did I say her name was? Marcia. Marcia's kind of like this seductress and everything. She's the sister of Robert Picardo's character Eddie. Eddie was the dude that like Karen was like looking for and stuff. And so like, Um, it's just this quaint little like hick type like place with a bunch of the locals, and so you don't really suspect nothing weird or bad is gonna happen until all of a sudden like Marcia seduces that of Karen's boyfriend and ends up biting him, and he's literally just like enthralled by her, and they like do it out in the woods, and then they slowly transform or into like werewolves and everything. Now the part where they do add like the stop motion CGI cartoonish looking stuff in their transformation and the glow effect around them is weird. I don't like that. But she knows there's something up with her boyfriend, Karen does, and wants to know what's going on, but she doesn't know. Then at some point in time, there's a woman named Terry, who shows up. Now this is when the movie really gets good because all of a sudden the Eddie character is still alive, and like Terry is like all of a sudden just like investigating, and she's looking for something, but I think she ends up in like a cave or like a cavern or something like that, and there's a werewolf chasing after her, and she chops off like his hand, and the transformation of the werewolf hand into the human hand is really cool looking and stuff. So then she goes into like a building, I think like a doctor's office or something, and she's calling somebody up on the phone, and she's telling him what's like going on and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, a werewolf just hands her a sheet of paper in the most like casual way ever. And it's so funny and comedic, and it's just so nonchalant. So then, he starts to like attack her, and then he eventually kills her and stuff. Probably my most favorite part of the entire movie and everything. Like, I love the Terry scene and stuff. And so I'm trying to think. She was talking to some guy on the phone. Chris, I believe. So he starts to head to like that area with a bunch of like silver bullets. Now, of course, this is the 80s, so everything's fast and loose. How does he know silver bullets are gonna kill this thing? You know what I'm saying? But that's typical werewolf lore and everything. So in the big climax of everything, like pretty much like there's another comedic part where like Karen's boyfriend is eating meat, and she's all like, "Thought you was a vegetarian." He's all like, "When you're hungry, you'll eat anything." I thought that was really funny as well. This is probably why the other movies started becoming like a comedy and everything. But like the big climax is towards the end when Karen starts to find out that all the locals are werewolves and everything. Even her boyfriend. She'll eventually will find out later about the boyfriend, but she finds out all the locals are werewolves, and they want to like turn her. But some of the people are like, no, we don't trust her, and she's an outsider and stuff. And it's like, holy crap! Like, when did these people turn into werewolves? Were they already werewolves, or did they slowly turn into werewolves later on in the movie? We don't know because we never see it, and it's just kind of freaky to think you go to this deserted place out in the woods, nobody really knows where you're at, you're away from civilization, and every local there just happens to be a monster, and they want to either eat you or turn you. So then in comes Chris with some like silver bullets. He starts shooting the place up. He rescues that of Karen. As they're trying to make their way out, then all of a sudden some werewolves go after them. One's on top of the car, and they start shooting at him. And then when one transforms back into human, it's Karen's boyfriend, but not before she gets bit. I'm like, oh no, she's gonna turn now. Now, sadly, we don't get no big action scene with the werewolves like trying to fight people or chase people down, nothing like that, because I'm gonna assume the limitations of the costumes and everything, like they just they didn't have much mobility, so they couldn't do a whole lot, so that sucks. I really wanted it to be like a big climactic action scene, you know what I'm saying? But sadly, we don't get that. We don't get to see no people fight hand to hand with werewolves and everything. And so I'm all like, what's gonna happen now? She's bit. She does one of the most courageous, interesting things ever. She tells him everybody needs to know about this. You know, like they can't keep this a secret. So she goes back to her job where she's a news reporter, and Chris is waiting there with the shotgun and everything, and she transforms on air, live television. Now, in this werewolf lore, you can transform without a full moon. And so she straight up turned into a werewolf. She looks like a fuzzy blonde dog and everything. And the people there are freaked out, like, what the heck is going on? And so Chris, with the shotgun, he feels bad what he has to do, but he ends up shooting and killing her and everything off screen. And the people watching this are assuming this is just some type of movie thing with special effects. So they don't believe what they see. Then at the very end, we see Marcia at like a bar with a grill, and she wants a burger rare, and then we just see a burger getting cooked and everything. And I'm just like, that's the most interesting way to end this, because she's looking to turn more people in the next town over. So yeah, this was like a really interesting werewolf movie and stuff. It takes a while for everything to start like kicking up and bumping and everything, but it's worth the wait. That wasn't that spooky. Alright, well, I shall talk to y'all later. Bye.